All right, we're rolling. I'm back in plenary session, video edition, joined by friend of the show, Bishal Gyawali. Bishal's from Queen's University, Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And I'm joined by newcomer to the show, Nathan Cherny. Nathan Cherny is based out of Israel. He is a legend in the field of oncology and palliative care. And he's going to be talking about a new paper that both Bishal and Nathan have worked on. It's the ESMO Meaningful Benefit Score. First, I just wanted to say, before we started rolling, it's always the most fun conversation. Nathan was telling me that he does occasionally listen to the show, but the COVID episodes, not all of those. And I was telling him not to worry. Don't you worry, because the COVID episodes are coming to a COVID end. And I can feel it. I can feel it on Twitter. I don't know about you, Bishal, and you, Nathan. I can feel it. The usual suspects have less and less to say. People are drifting back to their day jobs. For many of these people, that's going to be obscurity. And I look forward to that. Bishal, any thoughts on the shift back to normalcy?
I know how scared you are of COVID even after getting both the vaccines. And of course,
I wear my double mask every day.
You got both your vaccines, and Nathan is in Israel, so nothing to say about that. I have got only one vaccine, so do you want me to put this on before I talk to
you? Nathan, how are things in Israel on COVID? It looks wonderful, right?
Well, we've really gone from a bad situation to a very blessed situation. A couple of months ago, we were one of the worst places in the world, and now we are one of the best. The vaccine rollout was very smooth. It was very fast. It was extremely efficient, run by the HMOs. I think that 80% of the adult population is vaccinated. My 16-year-old is vaccinated, and my 12-year-old daughter is likely to be vaccinated in the next month. We're down to double-digit numbers of new cases and no deaths. We still have at work. We're still wearing masks in the streets. People are no longer wearing masks. Everyone who is doubly vaccinated has got a computerized generated pass. Gets you in. So, for instance, when I went to a wedding last week, you have to show your double vaccination pass to be into the wedding. The wedding hall managers are allowed to let in only 10% of people in the wedding who are not vaccinated, and if they've crossed that 10%, if more than 10% turn up, then they're going to send them home. But that just didn't happen. Almost everyone was vaccinated, and so the sense of returning to a level of normalcy. There is concern about the Indian variant. And I know that there have been a couple of cases of people presenting with the Indian variant in Israel who have been doubly vaccinated, but they had mild disease.
Right, that's my understanding. And of course, my heart goes out to places that are still grappling with the worst of things, such as India. And I do, and I've written I wrote a long time ago that we should have been deploying things to India even before all this latest stuff hit. And they will continue, I think, I'm afraid, to deal with these challenges. But the situation in the US and the UK and in Israel is a different situation. And I think we have to be able to just say that. And Bishal, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add some caution or some bad news to this good news that we have been discussing about COVID, because my parents are back in Nepal, and the situation with India and Nepal is getting worse every day. Yeah. In that whole subcontinent, and I think this is also a lesson that one mistake we did in our part of the world was that because we were not as severely hit with the first two waves, we are very complacent, and we're starting to have all these wedding parties and political rallies, although none of us were vaccinated, without any social distancing and other precautions, and this double mutant variant it hit hard, and none of us were prepared. We had that time because through nature, for whatever reason, we were not as badly hit by the first two waves, but we did not use that time to prepare ourselves better. So I hope the whole world and the global community will help out by sending the vaccines and reciprocity.
I'm actually a dual national. I'm Australian and Israeli, and I've just been following the story right now. that the Australian government is not allowing, there are 10,000 Australians who are currently in India, and the Australian government is not allowing them back into Australia.
Yes, that's their tactic all along. Yes, they have. Yeah.
But that raises all sorts of issues about citizenships and citizenship
Yes.
and rights, and there could well be a constitutional crisis out of this.
Yes. You all said you didn't want to hear a COVID episode. We're going to get a COVID episode, but I will say, I am working on some stuff about, the situation in India. I do think there's some things we can do. I also think, it's interesting. India, when they locked down initially, they locked down really hard, and they locked down in a place so hard where it was really hard for poor people. And then, of course, I think one of the things that we've long did not discuss well is that whatever things you do have to be sustainable, and you can lock down rock hard for a month, the hardest lockdown imaginable, shutting down national transit, making people bike thousands of miles home. But you can't sustain it forever, and people may rebound in a different way. And that might be some of what we're seeing. But it's hard to know. But anyway, I think my heart goes out to India. And I think we have to also recognize that some places are in a good place. And I think you can mourn for the tough stuff, and you can also be grateful for the good places too. But with that, let's talk about cancer medicine, because that's what we're here to talk about. Cancer medicine. Cancer medicine doesn't take a day off. Cancers doesn't take a day off. We don't take a day off either. And I will say that throughout this whole pandemic, I have been reporting in person to duty. I know Bishal has been doing the same. Nathan, I imagine you've been doing the same. The thing about being a physician is it is a duty. I use the word duty. That's a word that appears to be being deleted from the vocabulary, but I don't delete it. I think a duty means, you have a short time on this earth, and you have a duty to try to make the world better for other people. And however you can apply your talents and skills to that duty, that's your business. That's not for me to decide. But I think it is important, and I curse those who don't see duty in their life and want to talk to me about retiring early at the age of 37 or something like that. I curse them, because that's not what life's about. You don't retire. You don't get out of this game. We'll tell you when you're done. But you both, I wonder if you might talk for a minute. About what your practice is like, because Bishal's been on the show a couple times, but I don't think I've explicitly asked you. And Nathan, I don't know too much about your clinical life, but I wonder if you might talk for a little bit about your background, how you balance your time between research and clinical work, before we talk about the paper we're going to talk about today. Bishal, how about you? How do you juggle these two things, and also another continent, Nepal?
When I was having this discussion with Nathan a couple of months ago, when I said that I have 3 half-day clinics a week, Nathan thought that it was a luxury, and I do 3 half-day clinics.
What tumor types do you see, Bishal? What are your clinics?
Currently, I'm doing lung cancer and GI cancer and brain tumors.
Oh, brain tumors. Okay. And then the rest of the time is research.
Yeah, rest of the time is research and teaching. Yeah, all like research plus teaching, the whole academia package. And
you mean, I think the academia package is tweeting, writing grants, and then complaining about the grants on Twitter, and then some teaching, some research, and then maybe rarely seeing patients. That's what I gather. But okay, everyone's different. No, good.
Letting this big publishers company make money is also
That's right. Paying the open access fee, reviewing for free, giving Elsevier Saunders your free IP. Yeah, that's the academic life. Nathan, how about you? How do you divide your time in Israel?
Well, I wear 2 hats. I'm both a general medical oncologist as well as chief of palliative medicine. My oncology practice is I'm a general oncologist. I see really the full gamut of solid tumor diseases, and I also oversee a palliative care program, which is a rich interdisciplinary program, including specialty palliative care, specialty nurses, the first spiritual care training program in Israel, psychologists, social workers, an acute inpatient palliative care department, which is integrated with the oncology inpatient department. And I am seeing patients 4 days a week. I do conduct 2 teaching rounds a week. That was Mondays and Thursdays. And I have my holy day is my Wednesday. Wednesday is a total non-clinical days, and dedicated for research and writing. I have been blessed not to be bounded by grants, because most of my research over the last 10 years has been really work done through the agency or in collaboration with the European Society for Medical Oncology, who have been extremely supportive, particularly in my endeavors in terms of public health research, in palliative care, in general oncology, and in the integration of oncology and palliative medicine. And over the last 10 years, really, or 10 years, with driving this issue of developing a reliable and validated tool to be able to evaluate how much benefit anti-cancer treatments really provide.
That's terrific. And this is where the ESMO tool comes in. And I wonder if we might just talk about it. I mean, I think all three of us in our own ways, we're all frustrated by the same things in this field. And that is that we pay a lot of money. We're certainly paying them. We're willing to pay the money. You know, that's the part that, we don't have to sell anyone on. We're paying a ton of money. What are we getting for that money? And we're getting a bunch of patented compounds that we administer with massive implications on redistributing capital to shareholders that sometimes are truly transformative, drugs like Gleevec, drugs like maybe rituximab. But more often, too often is the right way to put it, they are marginal, the regorafenibs of the world. And every time I think about regorafenib, I think about a marginal benefit probably in an idealized population looks nothing like clinical practice. When I think about Avastin or ramucirumab, I know Bishal loves to pick on ramucirumab because ramucirumab is no good. I mean, it's just not a good drug. And I don't know, you knew it wasn't good because the thing you're trying to knock off, Avastin, that's no good. So you knew it was no good when you were making it. Okay, so we're frustrated by this. And the reality is these systems, they often pay a lot of money for these very marginal drugs. But the challenge, I think, well, at least one of the challenges is that it's very difficult, particularly for somebody who doesn't keep up with all these things, to separate which are the marginal drugs and marginal uses from the really good drugs and good uses. And it's hard if you go to the conferences to separate the two because you're just bombarded with hype. And of course, the next part of it is even when the trials look great, there are all these challenges with the design and conduct, like bad margins and bad crossover and misuse of post-protocol therapies. And we're detailing those for many years. But I wonder if you might start with you're motivating. What was it that originally motivated you both? I'll start with Bishal and then I'll go to Nathan to start to think about we need a better way. I don't know, to sort, to quantify, to capture value and separate the wheat from the chaff. The imatinibs, we're going to separate them somehow from the ramucirumabs. So that's the question. So, what was it about your background that led you to want to do this? I'll even say thankless work, because, not a lot of oncologists are really interested in doing this. So let's start with you, Bishal. What led you to this?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about what led me to this before you asked this question. I guess it was a constellation of events. Like my background from Nepal and getting trained in a high income country and seeing that stark difference in patients back in Nepal not being able to afford even generic paclitaxel for ovarian cancer, let's say, but patients in Japan were getting cediranibs and all those other anti-angiogenesis, newer bevacizumabs, despite not improving any survival. And that led me to think, like, how are we evaluating cancer drugs as appropriate or inappropriate for our patients? What's the benchmark? Where, like, I used to trust the guidelines and textbooks, but slowly it started to open up my eyes when I started to look behind those evidence that even if the guidelines are recommending it did not necessarily mean that those were actually appropriate drugs. Because what had happened was there was one of my patients back in Nepal who was asking me for medical advice. And then I was recommending a drug as if it was Japan, as if patients didn't have to pay. And the patient's family came back to me saying that they would have to sell their whole house to just get like a couple months worth of the treatment. And then I had to think, like, is that drug really worth selling your whole house for a couple months of treatment? And the answer to me was no. And then I had to revisit my decision, and I had to tell the patient's family that no, the benefit is marginal, so probably that's not a wise idea. And that's how I started to look after all these issues behind what forms a benchmark for quality evidence and what we can expect from the drug for what we are paying out of it. And obviously that started from ovarian cancer. And I think that's how you and I got in touch at the time. We wrote those papers on negative trials in ovarian cancer and that JCO piece on same data.
Yeah.
So that's how my whole journey started. But as I was graduating, I think in 2016 is when ESMO and ASCO formulated their value assessment tools. And at the time, I was very pleased because I realized that this was not a wild idea only running in Binay's and my head about evaluating the clinical benefit of cancer drugs. It was a legitimate thing that even such big organizations were concerned about. So that sort of provided legitimacy to the type of work that I was doing anyway. So it made me feel very happy. And now I'm extremely delighted that I am here with people like you who have inspired me, and people like Nathan, who is the father of the ESMO MCBS tool, working with him together to improve the tool. So this is like a dream come true for me.
That's terrific. Nathan, how about you? What took you to make this tool? What brought you to this space? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't live in India and I don't live in the US. I mean, in Israel, like in most European and Asian countries, we have an HTA body, which and each year the HTA body is given a budget, and they've got so much money they can spend to bring new drugs that are going to be reimbursed, and as part of that process, they ask the Oncology Society to rank what are the most important drugs to go into the basket of services. And in 2009, whilst I was on my sabbatical year in the Department of Bioethics at the NIH with Zeke Emanuel, I got sent a copy of the list, and at the very top of the list, the most important drug to go into the basket of services was Avastin for breast cancer. I thought, that's crazy. That is totally crazy. This is a drug that has PFS advantage, does not improve overall survival, does not improve quality of life, and it was not only was it a ridiculous recommendation, but it undermined the credibility of the Israel Oncology Society. And I put this in writing and communicated with membership of the society, and got incredible pushback. Really quite incredible pushback, to the point of insults and threats. And ultimately, I was given an opportunity to present my case, and present an argument, which I did, and the decision was revised. But what that triggered me the issue that we need a standard way to be able to evaluate what constitutes meaningful benefit or not. And in consultation with a range of experts who I'd worked with previously, both at Sloan Kettering in Australia, Ian Tannock in Canada, I started drafting out an initial draft of a magnitude of clinical benefit scale.
I see.
And then I took the idea to ESMO, because I said, that this is something, I thought that firstly, if this is a project backed by a major organization, it would be substantially more impactful than if it's the Nathan Cherny scale. And I put to them that this is something which is really important for the integrity of the organization, for the integrity of oncologists. And they said, thank you very much. And they didn't call back.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was in 2011. And in 2014, when Martine Picard became the president of ESMO, she suddenly had an interest in the idea. And she did call and said, look, let's do this. And we spent a year, a group of oncologists, public health experts, biostatisticians, nutting this out. At the time, the board was very anxious about it because they were scared of pushback from industry. But it is totally proven itself. And And so it has now become really a centerpiece of the whole scientific endeavor of the European Society for Medical Oncology. They see this as really their mark of their, a hallmark of their integrity. And it has been taken up by HTA bodies all over, in many parts of the world. So, from this very limited dream of influencing things in Israel to really having our tool, which has really become now the dominant tool in terms of evaluating the magnitude of benefit. It's been a really exciting and interesting ride. As I'm sure you're aware that I developed a tool. And so we worked with them, looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the different tools, and it became clear that there were substantial methodological problems with the ASCO tool.
Yes.
So this is sort of left the ESMO MCBS really as the dominant tool.
Yeah.
That's across the world today.
That's a terrific story. And I mean, I think it's a terrific success because, I think it's easy to see a problem in the world and it's easy to tweet about it. That's easy. Everyone does that. It's harder to try to push through peer review articles. It's harder to try to write meaningful critiques of things. It's harder to get professional societies to buy into it. It's harder to do that kind of real substantive work that leads to change. I just want to say that just because I think you'll find it funny. Many years ago, I had a really terrific resident at OHSU, Jessica Dreiser, and we did a paper where, we just looked in the literature to see what authors consider clinically meaningful benefits, and then we compared them to the ASCO and the ESMO tools. Now, back in those days, I think these tools are the first iteration. I think these are the first iteration of the tools, and I think the tools were good. But I don't think anyone would say that those tools are really, really stringent, at least the first iteration. You could squeak by a lot of drugs through it, and you're not asking for home runs. You're asking for singles, base singles. Okay. So, we asked that, and we found that, of course, you can guess, the authors of the studies, they were using the superlative salad. They were just saying meaningful benefit, and only about, I think 60% of the time or 40% of the time for OS did actually meet these guidelines. I thought that was funny. I think it's funny, but it also makes a point. And the point I want to make is this. The point is that although maybe someday in the future, somebody will look back and they'll be like, oh, why did they feel like they needed to do this? I think those people will be missing the fact that the field was drowning in hype when you came to throw a life vest. It was drowning in hype when you came out with that first iteration. We were so far in hype. You can't even imagine, unless you lived through that hype, how important this was, just to draw some line into the sand. This is the first line. Now we'll move it from there. Nathan, any thoughts on that? How that first line in the sand was?
Well, exactly. That was exactly it. We were concerned. We were concerned that the hype was harmful for many people. It was harmful for patients. It was harmful to the professional. It had harmful influence possibly on HTA bodies and on distribution of limited resources. And we needed to bring some order to the chaos. Furthermore, what adds to the chaos is the fact that so many different endpoints are used. And then, how do you bring into one tool, take into consideration the limited surrogacy of outcomes like PFS, when that's the primary outcome and that's the only data you've got, compared to studies that have got overall survival and quality of life data and toxicity, and getting that balance right is an ongoing part of the challenge. We are constantly reviewing the scores that we generate to look to see how reasonable or unreasonable they are. And this is why we're coming up now with the third iteration, of the tool will be coming out later on this year, as well as, for the first time, a version of the tool which has been validated for hematological malignancies, which is another vast field, lots of really expensive drugs.
Near and dear to me, yeah.
No one has applied these sort of matrices to up until now, and we will have a matrix for those as well.
Oh, that's terrific. I look forward to those updates. And Bishal, why don't you talk a little bit about this new paper? So this is the paper. You're the lead author of this paper. This is a new paper out in ESMO Open. This represents, I think, a nice attempt to summarize a lot of the problems that we've been cataloging in numerous papers on crossover, on non-inferiority, and things like that. Why don't you talk about this paper? What's this paper called, and what do you hope to accomplish there?
Yeah, so this is a paper titled Biases in Study Design, Implementation, and Data Analysis that distort the appraisal of clinical benefit in ESMO MCBS scores. So as a background, as you mentioned, I was checking for a couple of drugs, their value scores, and I don't recall exactly which drug, but a drug that seemed low value to me had received a high ESMO MCBS score. And that particular instance made me think, why is this happening? Why is this particular drug getting such high scores? Although my personal reading of the literature or my experience says that this is not that good a drug. Mm-hmm. And then I checked that particular trial had used a substandard control arm, and that's why it had a good hazard ratio.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, substandard controls, classic. Yeah. Okay.
So that's how it ended up getting a good MCBS score, because its hazard ratio is impressive. So that made me realize that, okay, yes, we are looking at the hazard ratio, we are looking at toxicities, we are looking at quality of life benefit, we are looking at all those issues that are important while coming up with the ESMO MCBS score. But if the trial is fundamentally flawed in its design, then that's a way how the drug can cheat into getting a good score. So, and when Nathan asked me last year to present about those issues in trial design that could affect the scores in the ESMO annual meeting, I tried to look more into it to gather some of what else can affect the scores. One was substandard control arm that I had come across. And I presented at the ESMO meeting. Then Nathan and I did a lot of back and forth discussing more and more issues. And what started with 3 or 4 issues ended up being 10 different issues. But I think now we have a comprehensive list of everything. Yeah, maybe not everything, but almost everything that can affect the design of the trial, analysis of the trial, or implementation of the trial issues that are not currently reflected in the ESMO MCBS tool. But now this gives us a list of issues that we can think how to address in the future editions or revisions of the tool, so that we are able to incorporate them. And even if we are not, I think this is a good teaching tool for trainees and oncologists all over the world to just go through that checklist and tally every trial that they read, whether those trial has those deficiencies or not. So we are proud of this work, because, and that's the reason we published it as open access, is because we think any trainees or oncologists all over the world can make use of this paper as a teaching tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And it's that, it's just what, I always like to tell people, you can just never read the conclusion and take it for granted. You have to actually think about the study. Was the control arm the right control arm? Did they introduce crossover when they ought not to have? Did they not introduce crossover when they ought to have? Did they do a non-inferiority study? Was the margin so big you could parallel park a school bus in that margin? Was the control arm adequate? And, it's funny you say that, comprehensive, but then you added, at least as far as for now, because I think you're right of something. Every year that goes on, I always find there's a new way I'm getting fooled, and I have to add another chapter to the book of ways I've been fooled, because there's a new way, and you don't even see it at first glance. Nathan, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about either this paper or where you see this moving, building on Bishal's comments. Yeah.
Again, my impetus in terms of even asking Bishal to do that actually came from listening to your show. When I listened to your discussion on Mona Lisa 7, I was actually embarrassed that Mona Lisa 7 had scored so highly.
Yes.
So just remind you that this is the issue of ribociclib is in a first-line setting in premenopausal women.
Yes.
Where about
post-protocol therapy is very poor.
Where 25% of the patients had never received any post-progression treatment.
Yes.
Heard of.
That's criminal. Yeah, criminal. It's criminal because we know that disease is a disease. You could put many more treatments for these patients. You know, you can put many more. I know it.
In fact, Andy Seidman has published guidelines about breast cancer studies, and in that exact setting of the receptor positive HER2 negative patient, he says there are at least 6 lines of therapy the patients should be having.
Yes, I agree.
And 25% of patients got none.
Had nothing after protocol. Yeah.
I actually tried to explore this with a corresponding author. He himself was having difficulty getting data out of Novartis to be able to answer my questions.
Oh, of course. Nathan, I've so many times I've emailed these corresponding authors and they say, oh, I don't have any data. You got to talk to the company. Company won't give me data. And then I was like, why the is your name on that paper then? As I said, why is your name on that paper? You don't have anything. You don't know anything. What do you name on that paper for? Okay, go on. Sorry, pardon my French. I didn't say it.
It made me very sensitive to the notion that these sort of flaws are compromising my integrity and the integrity of our tool. And so I figured we need to start addressing this, to identify what are the things that can distort our scores, and to see what as a next step, what we will do to introduce to try to either annotate these issues or penalize these issues, but at least to bring them to the discussion in a very ordered and structured manner, and emphasizing also that these are just not our idiosyncrasies. Or everything, every issue that we're brought to the table has been brought up and backed by the EMA and the FDA.
Yes.
And the ICH. These are not new issues. These are issues that are meant to be regulated, but are frequently unregulated.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just going to add to it. With Mani Mohyuddin, we just did this thing in JAMA Network Open where we looked at post-protocol therapies in myeloma, and it is an embarrassment. Multiple myeloma disease where you can just keep going through lines of therapies, and there's a huge fraction of people who get no further therapy post-protocol, which distorts every OS, because OS then is, I hate to say this, but if you take a drug that does nothing, but all it does is delay progression, it does no OS benefit, but you wed it to a backbone that actually does improve OS. If you run these randomized trials where no post-protocol therapy is given, you're really giving a trial of more backbone versus less backbone. You'll find an OS benefit not related to the actual drug. It's an artifact of the amount of backbone you've given. But so that was just one thought. And then the other thought I have is, Nathan, you're inspiring me. How can someone sign up for this panel? I want to be on this team. This is a good team. I got Bishal. I got Nathan. I mean, how does one join the ESMO panel?
First, anyone can correspond with us. Okay. We do advertise for new membership periodically, and people who are members of ESMO are welcome to submit applications. And I think as Bishal can testify, it's really a very interesting and a fun ride. Another thing that we're looking at is the quality of life data, and because quality of life can not only cause an upgrade on using the ESMO MCBS, but if a PFS study has no overall survival data, yes, no overall survival advantage, and a quality of life study was done which showed no quality of life gain, they get penalized, because it's essentially saying that there is failed surrogacy, and failed surrogacy means you really got an empty hand of cards.
That's a terrific topic. I'll just tell you one thing on that topic that I think is really interesting, and I'll give you a reference for it. The reference is Alison Haslam in JAMA Network Open, and it was like duration of checking quality of life. But here was the short answer. The short answer is...
It is quoted in our paper.
What's that? Oh, you've seen this paper? Yeah.
It is cited in our paper.
Yeah.
Oh, it's what?
That paper we have cited in our...
Oh, in your current paper, I see, right. But I was, okay, you're familiar with it. Okay, well, I'll tell listeners. So somebody who he can hear, be interested in what I have to say. Okay, I'll tell listeners. The basic idea is this. It's easy to say, there's two things that matter, living longer and then quality of life. But quality of life isn't just quality of life in the first 6 weeks you're on a protocol. It's quality of life if you go down that journey path. And all of these studies, they never collect quality of life. So one can imagine a drug that truly prolongs first PFS, but then the progressions come become fast and furious or you run out of options, you'll have a quality of life decrement post-protocol that's never captured in these quality of life metrics.
But even in PFS1, even during the PFS, unless you're seeing that there's delayed deterioration in quality of life,
then what is it?
And we never see an improvement in quality of life. We haven't had a single paper that's shown an improvement in quality of life. If you don't have, if mature survival data shows that there's no gain, you don't have much. And this was a story with bevacizumab and breast cancer.
Yes.
Just to go back to that and to that initial trigger. Let
me ask you this. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Finish your thought.
So in the back of my mind, I was waiting for the plenary session where you say, hey, what's with this ESMO MCBS stuff? Okay, high scores to all these rotten studies. Okay. And I wanted to preemptively address the issue before it got the Vinay Prasad treatment.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, well, I guess I feel like I have one listener that appreciates it. Okay, good. I'm glad to keep you honest. No, what I want to ask you is, so here's my question to both of you. It's sort of a philosophical question now that you've done this work, but I'm actually kind of genuinely curious what you think of it. That old saying, why does the rabbit run faster than the fox? The rabbit runs for his life and the fox just runs for a meal. By that, I mean, the incentives in this ecosystem are different. We are the ones chasing the people who design and conduct studies and saying, hey, guess what? I've been following up on your study. And I notice after several years of observation, you're not doing a good job documenting quality of life. You're not doing a good job with post-protocol therapy. You're not doing a good job with your control arms. Here's our empirical analysis of the last 5 years. Here's another paper. But meanwhile, they're running ahead. They're running. And they're running. They find new things. They found issues with drug dosing. They found this thing to do. They found that thing to do. They got censoring problems. They got this problem. They got that problem. They got some new thing that we don't even know about. It's going to take you a few years to catch up to them, to figure out what they're up to now. My question is, if the goal of this whole process, and forgive me, I'm maybe a naive oncologist. I thought the goal of this process was to make drugs that are better for people who are suffering from cancer. I thought that was the goal. And if that is the goal, and the person who's in charge of testing those products is the person who's going to make a $10 billion if they win, P of 0.049, Bishal, they get the $10 billion. P of 0.051, they might even be able to get $10 billion with this ODAC. With this ODAC, and say, oh, we'll take it. But in a normal world, they get pushed away. But I guess my question is, are we always going to be 2 steps behind the latest game? Or will we ever be able to catch them? And if we want to catch them, by catch them, I mean have trials that are congruent with patient interest, not like we're trying to punish anybody. What do we need to do for that? Any thoughts?
You need to change the incentivization, and the incentivization is driven by Medicare Part D.
Yes,
and which that's in the past. But, and the mandate of the FDA and EMA, as long as their mandate is to license any drug which is safe and effective, and even without defining effectiveness and marginal effectiveness, still if it's better than the last drug, that still counts for effectiveness.
Yes.
As then the Medicare Part D laws suspend all market forces and say you choose your own price and we will pay it. Okay, this creates all sorts of bizarre incentives. Yes. So until when those incentives are taken away, then the game will change. But until this bizarre suspension of market forces and over incentivization is changed, we're going to be stuck with the same cycle.
Yes, I believe that's right. Yeah.
I think
Bishal, thoughts? Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's what I think. Yeah.
I think there is also this issue of regulatory capture, right? Like people like us who are trying to do this work of trying to, make sure that the trials are conducted properly, they are reported properly, there is no bias in trial design, drugs are really efficacious, and they need to pass a certain benchmark before getting approved,
yes,
a higher benchmark for getting reimbursed. We are all doing this out of out of, I don't know, why are we even doing this? We're doing this despite the lack of motivation, because we believe in that greater good. Yes, there is some motivation in that, okay, papers and academic currencies, but I think it's much easier to gain those academic currencies writing papers that other people will write for you and give money for you for doing so. It's much difficult to write your own papers and go through, do all this research and build those academic credentials. But on the other hand, there is a huge financial incentive for keeping things as they are, right? For getting more surrogate endpoints, for fulfilling only one half of the equation of accelerated approval, but not fulfilling the second half of the equation. And there is a huge financial incentive in doing this. The industry obviously wants to devote its heart, mind, and soul in doing that. But what is the incentive for people who try to keep this under balance, who try to, like, you refer to the ODAC meeting. What is the incentive for honest people to put that extra effort to sign up, to become a member, to make a presentation and vote no? But there are huge incentives. If you're lined up with the industry will do all that on your behalf. They will like, you'll be a key opinion leader without having to do anything, just by voting yes.
Yes.
We do know that the industry do not like getting scores of 1 and 2 on their drug, and they know that hurts them, and they know that's going to hurt them in markets that have HTA bodies.
Yes, a few with European markets, Canada, perhaps. Yeah.
Which is many markets outside the United States.
It's too bad that we're 70% of the market. That's a problem. That we got all the cash. But I just want to say one thing about the ODACs. I mean, to build on Bishal's point, we just saw this week 6 drugs. They failed the confirmatory study. The confirmatory studies are a low enough bar. That's one thing. They failed. You've documented nicely, Bishal, in that paper with Kesselheim in JAMA Internal Medicine. The accelerated approvals, it's already kind of a joke. They're confirming them based on the same surrogate that they used to approve them in the first place. So what the hell are you doing? It's either not a valid surrogate or it is a valid surrogate. You can't have it both ways. Anyway, so now they do the confirmatory studies. They don't work. 6 trials. But these panelists, 4 out of 6, they vote to keep it on the market. It would have been 6 out of 6 if Rick had just kept his mouth shut. Rick had to basically twist him to say, don't do those. I can't take it anymore. If the oncologists in this space, to your point, Bishal, they are repeat customers. They have a repeat stake with these companies. They're going to have to go to these companies on Tuesday and negotiate their next IIT. They have the meeting on Tuesday, and on Monday they got to vote to keep it on the market or not. I mean, I'm being dramatic, but this is the point. How can you tell them? How are you going to tell Merck, we're going to pull your Pembro approval, and then on Tuesday, ask it for your IIT in the neoadjuvant setting? Ask them for a favor. You need them to do favors. If you don't get their favors, you can kiss your trialist career goodbye. There's not a trialist in this world who has any shot of success unless they curry the favor of the company. The company can always strike down the studies, even the cooperative groups. They need the company to give the drug. So this is this ecosystem we've created. We've created a system. It's a courtroom trial and it's a murder trial. But however you vote in the murder trial, you got to go home with the defendant. You got to go home with that guy. And you got to have to lay in bed next to that person. How are you going to vote you're going to take it easy on this person? And I think that's the crux of the issue. Nathan, any thought? Go. No, sorry.
No,
you want to say something? Go ahead. Say something.
What I mean by regulatory capture. So that's how regulatory capture happens. One half of the, one part of the debate does not have that much incentive. They're just trying to do good because of their conscience. But the other half has huge incentive to make results the way they want. And that's what we have been seeing every day. You say that accelerated approval is a package, right? Accelerated approval does not mean just the first half of the equation of getting drugs approved early based on surrogate endpoints. There is the other half of the equation. That means you should confirm benefit, and if you can't, the approval will be withdrawn. Yes. And if you can't honor the second half of the equation, you can't get the first half of the equation either. It comes as a package.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, what you're suggesting is that the people on the ODAC have got conflicted interests.
Yes, they do. There's no doubt about it. They all, I mean, most of them, the vast majority do.
And if that, I mean, that to my mind, that would require a structural change in the structure of the ODAC. So that this should be either healthcare professionals or data scientists who are not conflicted, because the moment you bring in all these sort of conflicts, people are human, and there are, even if they're not doing this consciously, the whole issue of reciprocity is often
that's it. Yes,
a subconscious reflex.
Yes,
and there's a whole biology of reciprocity which has been described, and and this is why the issue of selection of people for this sort of task, who need to be free of outside the loop, so that these decisions can be based on the data and not on possibly subconscious competing interests.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I think there's the three buckets of the problems with the ODAC. I mean, the one bucket is that they have personally taken money from these companies and they stand to take money in the future. That's true of the FDA members too. They're going to go work to be medical director, VP at Janssen, at this place, at that company. That's where they go when they're done with the job. The next bucket is the fact that even if they're not taking money in their own pocket, they need these companies for the trials. And not me, because I don't do that, but I don't run trials. But other people run trials, and you need the company to play ball. So that's the other kind of the other kind of reciprocity bucket. And then the third bucket that we haven't even talked about, which is related to your article, which is related to this podcast, I think, and the book Malignant that I tried to write for this goal, which is that they don't even know what to look for. No one taught them. No one taught them what to look for in trials, what control arms mean. No one taught them what the implications of keeping a drug on market that has failed are for the broader market ecosystem. They haven't even thought about that. They said things at the ODAC that blew my mind. They said that we know in uncontrolled experience that a fraction of people have durable benefit. I was like, but the randomized data shows that, the difference in the tails is actually may not even be that much in some of these malignancies. It doesn't have the same durability as you might think. They said that, if one person benefits from it, we have to offer it to everyone. And by one person benefits, they mean an anecdote that they benefited. And I was like, but if that is your regulatory bar, then every failed study has one person who benefited. I mean, I can think of 15 drugs that never made it to market because they failed in studies, but we'll bring them all back. In fact, we are. It's called tivozanib. Tivozanib was a shitty drug 15 years ago, but it just kept trying and trying and trying. Now it's back on the market. So I think it's a huge problem. They don't know how to interpret the studies. They have these deep conflicts with it. And then the real problem is there's no external squeeze, which is that, the average person in the public, they heard that, you voted to keep atezolizumab for platinum ineligible patients as a first-line treatment option for urothelial cancer. Okay, they don't know. And they're counting on the system to protect them and their taxpayer money and give them good choices. Bishal, thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. First, I totally agree that many, even experts, do not understand the seriousness of the problem, and some of the things that were told during the ODAC meeting as a justification of why the drug's approval needs to be maintained blew my mind. Like, level of ignorance, and people having the power to vote yes or no, having that much power, but having so much of ignorance about some fundamental statistical principles of trials. And seriously, I had to ask whether some of these people can't see, or they actually see, or are pretending to be blind. Like, there is a difference.
Yes, there's a difference. Yeah.
The paper that Nathan and I wrote are for people who can't see, so that it will help for people to see things. But if there are people who can see but are pretending, but are turning a blind eye because it's in their favor to be blind, then this paper is not going to help.
Yes.
Because one example I'll give you.
Yes.
With regards to atezolizumab in triple-negative breast cancer, the first trial that led to accelerated approval.
Yes.
Because they saw survival difference.
Yes.
That survival analysis should not have even happened.
Yeah.
That was against their own statistical design.
Yeah.
The survival analysis should not have happened.
Yes, it's hierarchical design. It should not have happened. It's likely to be spurious. And then the paclitaxel data comes, it's negative. They still say no. And then they're pegging it to some neoadjuvant study that is neither here nor there, has nothing to do with this.
listen to this. The actual argument that was made at the ODAC meeting. So this is the statistical analysis that was not supposed to happen. They still did and said there is a survival difference.
Yes.
And the FDA said, okay, we'll give preliminary approval, confirm it.
Yeah.
Confirmatory trial failed.
Yeah.
Failed OS, failed PFS. Now the argument they are making is this confirmatory trial is probably false negative, but that OS difference they saw in the preliminary trial that was against the statistical principle is a real one.
Yeah.
So we have to trust that. That is a real positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
One, a properly powered trial for the same, is a false negative. And
only the failures are false negatives and all the successes are real. You know, Bishal, if you're ignorant but very confident, there's a place for you. It's called Twitter. It's not the ODAC. It's Twitter. It's Twitter. Nathan, I know our time's about up. Maybe I'll give you the last thoughts on this issue. I'm sure you have several thoughts. What are your last thoughts on this? I mean, I guess we could go on all day, but
I see the regulatory process is a whole separate issue. I'm not familiar enough with the processes of the EMA to see if they are compromised by the same sorts of problems or not. I suspect that they are not as compromised as the FDA, and it's interesting to see where there are differences in the decisions about licensing and between the two bodies. I see our paper is not going to solve the licensing issue, but our paper is going to try to give people the tools to take off their rose-colored glasses and to have a structured approach to be able to critically read literature. And amongst the things that Bishal and I have been working on is we've also got a teaching slide set to teach people how to do this sort of thing, and I think that will probably make its way also to open access, and that really gives people a very strong 10-point checklist, which is very, very clearly explained, and will hopefully encourage and teach a new generation to be more effective critical readers and not to be reading literature with rose-colored glasses, and then to take that into ODAC discussions and so on.
Terrific. Nathan Cherny. Yeah, no, it's terrific. Look forward to that. Nathan Cherny, Bishal Gyawali, thanks so much for doing this.
My great pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'll have to say before we leave that I'm very grateful to Nathan for providing me this opportunity to work together. I have really learned a lot working with him. It has been an honor, and he's such a rigorous scientist, and it has been a very wonderful learning experience.
That sounds great.
We love you, and we're glad you're part of the team, Bishal. Okay.
Thank you both.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Bye.